My name is Willie Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. Hello, welcome to part one of our three-part discussion with Grant Van Ulbrich. Grant is the Director of Global Sales Transformation at Royal Caribbean, and he's an expert on organizational change, leading change in the sales force. In fact, he just wrote a book that you can get. I'll make sure it's linked on the Sales Lab website called Transforming Sales Management. He has a good perspective, I think, on organizational change that kind of emphasizes the role of the individual. In my opinion, organizations don't change so much as the people in the organization change. And I think Grant gets that. We have a very good discussion, a little bit about his journey into sales leadership from frontline service roles, and an awful lot about organizational change. Hope you get a lot out of it. Thanks.
I originally started out with Norwegian Cruise Line. I was there for 4 years, actually almost 5 years with them. And my first job was a port and cruise consultant. So I was on the ships telling people what they're going to do, what they're going to see, where they're going to go, and how to make the most of their voyage, and taking care of the loyalty programs, shopping programs. And from there, I thought it would just be one contract, but 20 plus years later, I'm still here.
Yeah, so you were frontline service. You were right there on the ships directing guests, and your title now, remind me what the title now is?
Director of Global Sales Transformation.
Okay, so that's a little different, it seems. That seems like a pretty massive transition.
It's quite a transition, I made the whole gauntlet. I spent about 15 years working on ships in various roles. And, 1 year, it was just time to transition shoreside. And luckily, there was a role available here in the Miami headquarters that they needed somebody to help with the embarkation process around the world. And I knew how to do that because I handled that from the ship side. So I was a good candidate for that. And it just allowed me to transition smoothly into the corporate shoreside life. So it was a good transition. But I've always been from the ship side of it. And even before, sales that's how it started out in the cruise industry, selling future cruises and selling the retail opportunities on board the ship, and also with our retail partners on land. So that hasn't changed. It just transitioned. My customers transitioned, And so today now I'm supporting all of the internal sales employees and our travel agents and travel customers around the world. It's just, that's what I'm doing today, leading, as we call it, sales transformation. Well, what is that, And it's changing the way we sell completely, bringing the sales science and sales psychology to the principals and taking a hard look at, well, how are we behaving versus how do our customers value and the way they want to be sold to? And what does that entail? Sales training, sales education, university application, global sales science and research. So it's taking a very different look at how do we sell within the cruise industry. And I know right now we're the only ones in the industry doing it, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah. So your prototypical customer might be the travel agent who has people coming to them and saying, okay, we want to do, bringing maybe vague criteria to them. And then you're trying to get that person to act as a broker of sorts to say, hey, here's a great package with Royal Caribbean and it meets your criteria, and sort of encouraging them to recommend you guys above other alternatives, above the African safari, above the, whatever else.
The land tour as well. Yeah. Yeah. In a nutshell, that's it. That's, if you take it granular, that's down what we're trying to do. But at Royal Caribbean, we view it completely different. We used to be years ago, it was until I started on this journey. Oh gosh, it's been 4 years now since I started sales transformation. And initially when I started it, it was supposed to be to create a sales manual. The company is 52 years strong now, and there's no sales manual. It doesn't exist. Well, how have we done it? It's just been the good old boys sales, hand-me-downs, and then transition to bring diversity into it, to good old boys to good old girls, But there was really no curriculum. There was no thought process. And as you know, sales is really the last frontier to be professionalized through academia, through university, through education, through science and psychology. And now we even have, undergrad and graduate programs specifically in sales, which I've participated in and I continue to do with my doctorate. And the world's changing, and really exciting that we are actually taking this last frontier and saying, no, there's a better way, and there's a holistic way to put research and science behind it. So in doing so, what we've done over the last few years is to say, right, well, let's throw a sales manual. Good thing we didn't have one because it would just be cookie cutter from someone else. Let's actually take a hard look at what is the science behind the sales process. What is the cycle? What are the funnels? What are the contributors from a consumer standpoint all the way to the business standpoint, which is a customer as well, all the way to what we have from a supplier centric point of view. How do we blend that all together? And then you bring the psychological piece of it with the values and behaviors and say, right, how do we portray ourselves versus how does a customer want to be sold to? And that's the cusp of really taking sales to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Versus just, consultative. You remember in the 1980s, we had the consultative tips and tricks, and if you just do this and you'll overcome objections, and here's the close, and here's the types of closings that you should be doing. In hindsight, that's all supplier centric and it's manipulative.
Yeah.
And what we've learned is no. Start listening to your consumer, to your end user. Get in there and find out really what their wants are and needs are, and be so bold in your sales process and your sales culture that if you don't have what they need, tell them. Authenticity, be authentic in your relationship, in your approach. They're coming to you for guidance, for support. And so it's a completely different way of selling today. And it'll continue to evolve.
Absolutely. So you come in, there's no real sales manual. So I guess people are just doing whatever they've devised themselves, a lot of sort of idiosyncratic methodologies being applied. And what is the first thing that you do to start to make things systematic?
The first thing I did, I spent, it was almost 4 months going around the world in our company to find out what we had. What were we teaching our salespeople? What were we providing them? What tools did we give them? Was it Salesforce? Was it, some sort of applications, et cetera? What did we have to give them and support them in doing their jobs? How many different sales roles do we have in our company? So I literally went from leader to leader, human resources to business unit to find out and uncovered in my research. And in doing so, I found out that we had over 1,100 sales job descriptions inside our company HR system, but we didn't have that many sales roles.
Yeah.
At best, going through the research process, you learn there's only really true key 5 areas of sales: retail sales and territory management, account management, contact center call management, opportunity management, which you have to define for your own business what that would be, which for us is business development. And then you have leadership development as well, too, the different core key areas. So what are the jobs that fit within those areas, and stop trying to invent, things just because of the salesperson that's coming along. And that's what we had done. When I took all this research back to the sales leadership at the different cruise brands, because it wasn't just Royal Caribbean, it was Celebrity Cruises, Azamara Cruises, Silver Sea Cruises as well, all the ones within our portfolio. In some of the interviews, I asked them, when we go to hire a key account manager, what do we give them? What do we train them on? And the typical answer was, we have so much. We've got all this sales training. We've got so much. And I'm like, okay, knowing in the back of my mind that I'd inventoried it already, I just wanted to know where the true leadership drive was. And in doing so, it was very shocking and very delicate for me to portray back to them that what you thought you had as sales training really is product training only. It's a supplier-centric approach. We are cruise ships, so it makes sense. We have destinations, we have itineraries. We need to articulate and teach travel agents and customers what the ships are all about. Most people haven't even been on a cruise. Most travel agents haven't even set foot on a ship, let alone they're selling them. So product training makes sense. But over the years, that has been branded as sales training, and it really isn't.
Yeah.
And so when I said again, and I would give them the data back, to show what we really had, we would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of PowerPoint presentations, videos, archive documents, and digital to support that. But I said, what do you give the account manager, regardless if it's a national account, global account, multi-state account, country account, whatever it is, what do you give them to do their jobs? Is there some sort of a template? Is there a tool? Oh yeah, we do annual business plans. Okay, but that's supplier centric only. That's just your view. Where's their view? The customer's view, from the B2B side. Well, we don't really have that. We hire the best people. Okay, but do you ask the question, what have they been trained on? And right there, it started to be, I'm hitting a brick wall. Faces are just closing. Don't know where you're going. Why are you doing this? And, if you look at the book, Jason Jordan and Michelle Vazana, Cracking the Sales Management Code, we're no different from any other corporation around the world. Again, and I'm speaking to, the master here, sales, trying to get sales science and psychology and education out is new. It's relatively new. So major corporations just haven't jumped on the journey yet. But so then I pulled back. And then I went back with my sales leadership overseas. I was stationed in Barcelona and London at the time. And we said, look, there's nothing inside our company that's going to support this journey. We have this, the only thing we can do is the same old, same old. So we've got to start from scratch if we want to transform. And back then, my job was called sales improvement, and I hated it. I hated that job. And I said, why am I the director of sales improvement? I don't like it. It's offensive. And I'm supposed to improve people. I'm not improving people. So I didn't like that. Well, the only other job title was sales enablement. Okay, well, I don't like that either. I'm not enabling them. They're fully able. They're capable of doing their jobs. They're missing the educational part of it. And so at the time, my vice president had connected me with an outside executive coach because I needed polishing. How do I go from the different, from junior management all the way to senior management and make that transition, and mature. And so I started working with the executive coach, and who happened to be connected with Consalia Sales Business School in London, who have the undergrad, the apprenticeships, and the master's programs. There's 3 master's programs and a master's in science for sales. And the highest one was leading sales transformation. And so we got back together and he said, Grant, you need to go back to school. If we're going to build anything that is impactful, that could change the trajectory of our company, we need to bring in some education, something that's going to empower. And so I did. So I enrolled in it and started through that. And I thought I knew sales. I thought I understood. Everything that I had learned was old school, whether I pulled it together from my own for my sales career, or in the 80s again, come back up. I'm a child of the 80s and the consultative sales techniques and all of that training. But I didn't really realize that there is psychology behind it and there is a sales science structure behind it, what you're doing and how you should be doing it, and what are the results of your actions as you leak it back to the behaviors of the way people want to be receptive. So that was all new for me. And then one of the modules was called Leading Change. How do you do that for your salespeople? And we were introduced to all the major global change models, and they just didn't sit with me at all. And I thought, our salespeople are constantly embattled with rejection, trying to overcome rejection, missed appointments, deferment, competing with other cruise brands and cruise representatives' times with their B2B customers. There's massive amounts of change that we're going through. I can't use these models. And so I raised my hand to my professors with I thought, I don't get this. And my cohort of about 15 members, and these are other global sales leaders, mind you. I was the junior. There were multiple senior vice presidents, and here I was the junior American Yankee in the international course. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't get this. And the room went really quiet. And they said, what don't you get? And I said, these models are all prescriptive. They say that you might be shocked, you might be angry, you might be upset, but then you're going to magically accept the change. And I said, that's not how people think. And I said, as a human being, don't I have the ability to reject change? They said, well, yes, you do. And I said, well, these models don't reflect that. Well, these are the global change models.
It's kind of a rather large omission.
Right? It's a huge omission, and I didn't realize it at the time how much the global change leaders were saying that, and the research had confirmed that. So they said, make your own model. And I said, okay, don't challenge me. I'll do it. And so I did. And I created there with my professors and my cohorts, we came together and I created a new personal change model called Scared So What. And what I did was instead of shying away from fear, the fear of change, which is metathesiophobia, or the fear of a supervisor or a leader not having the ability to coach somebody through change, I said, let's hit it head on. What is scared? Surprise, conflicted actions. What actions would you do? Are you receptive, rejective? Do you explore any other opportunities? And have you made a decision? It's the emotional side of the change that's happening to them. And what I wanted to do was build something that said that, as a sales professional and a salesperson experiencing change, you need to recognize it and make a decision about it. And so that worked. But then came it was magic. My professor said, so what? And I said, well, we need to make a plan. If you've made a decision, regardless if it's favorable or unfavorable, you still are going to ask, so what? So what's your strategy? What are your options? Do you have a way forward? Do you have hope or know how it's going to work? What actions will you take to ensure it's successful? And finally, what will you do to take ownership of your change scenario? And little did I know in building this and continuing out through the masters and helping to lead and build our sales program and academy, Scared So What just kept growing. And, we were in a perfect business entity for it to grow because our customers are worldwide. So I was teaching Scared So What to people in, to the Russian partners, to the Egyptian partners, to Europe, Middle East, and Africa partners. It was just catching on, and it had a domino effect that I didn't anticipate in the fact that salespeople and actually all of our employees were able to embrace change quicker and get to a decision point. And once they were no longer scared, right, what's your so what? They were making their own so what plan, getting into your strategy. And from a sales perspective, that was brilliant because I want my salespeople thinking about what's your strategy? What options you're going to do to make these deals or to support these to customers or to support that trade partner, and then think about how we transitioned into the global pandemic.
And so the planning is encouraged for both acceptance and rejection. So, putting it into, maybe a loose example here, the company says we are going to do something different now. We're implementing a new technology. We're following a different sales methodology. The individual employees in the company, the salespeople, receive this message. They have to decide accept or reject. And you are saying you should be able to put together a plan of how you're going to enact that, regardless of that.
Yeah.
So how does that, now I understand from like a scientific perspective that's valid and useful and reflective of real life, but does that, does that sit well with the organization? Like I don't want you, maybe I don't want you to teach the employees how to reject this brilliant change that, because managers always do brilliant things. I'm implementing this brilliant change, and the last thing I want you to do is give these people a reason to reject my change initiative, or am I barking up the wrong tree here?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there are some people that might have that initial view, but I would say that's very supplier-centric view. That's a very selfish. Usually, they might come from an HR perspective to say, I don't want to empower my people to reject our directions. If you take a customer-centric point of view, because that's something that's very unique here, and I know I'm an outlier here, but within this organization and all of these buildings, we all are selling to each other, and we have customers within the company. Human resources customers are the employees. Operations customers are the employees as well, too. Accounting's customers are the individual employees submitting invoices and processing payments, etc. So we all have a choice, and we all have customers that we have to report to. So if you think of it from a leadership perspective, I would want our employees to be able to stop and think about personal change. And for those who are possibly rejecting it, if I'm your supervisor, I want to know that. Because as I now can take the tool and use it as a coaching tool and say, okay, what are you surprised about? What are you conflicted about? What actions have you done? Well, I haven't done anything. Okay, let's talk about that for a moment. What could you do? An action is usually a quick decision in a negative side is the lack of actions or the lack of information or the absorption of understanding. if you facilitate that as a leader, then you can bring people on board and change them from a change detractor to a change adapter, or a champion. So from a leadership perspective, I want to help my employees get on the right side, so that they can see through and see how it might benefit for themselves. And if they can't, that's okay too. I at least will be able to clearly see who is with me and who is not with me. Because again, you're individuals, you have a choice, right? You don't magically have to accept every single change that comes at you, but we have to be able to communicate with each other.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so what I'm hearing is, and I mean, you're echoing things that you said a moment ago about your approach toward the customers, right? That, if you can't provide something, then you just tell them. You have this transparent, honest sort of policy. And of course, we can go find YouTube videos of sales leaders talking about, oh, I did this once, and then the customer came back and bought from me for life because they trusted me. So there's like this self-serving, hey, maybe if I'm a nice guy, it'll get reciprocated, So it's sort of this, I don't know, almost cynical sort of view of if I pretend to be nice, I'll get paid off at the back end. But it's, what it sounds like you're doing is you're leading as a sales process, right? You're acknowledging that the employees are stakeholders that need to be influenced and persuaded. And this is something that I take issue a lot with my sales management students, my grad students, that, the biggest pet peeve, maybe it's not a pet peeve, the big thing that's been under my skin for the last couple of months is this statement, and I'm sure you've heard it, that, when you grab these great salespeople and you try to make them into managers, you promote them into management, and then you find out that the best salespeople were not the best sales leaders. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at that, and I understand there are examples of that. There's reasons that they're saying that, but the more I think about that, the more I get pissed off, because what on earth did you train your salespeople to do, if not listen, adapt, persuade, position, convince people of the value of accepting your recommendation, be it a product purchase or setting an appointment, or, hey, on the employee side, adopting a new technology or implementing a new system, or whatever it may be. How on earth? I mean, it's almost like it's like self-incrimination, like the people that keep saying that should maybe plead the fifth, because what I'm starting to hear is I did a really bad job training my salespeople. They can put up numbers. They think it's a scoreboard thing, and they can sort of maybe it's a transactional environment, and they can sort of push somebody into purchasing, and there's not any major consequences to that, which of course is not the case in B2B or in a leadership position. But if you've trained your people to influence and persuade, then of course they're going to be good managers. Of course they're going to be good leaders. You might need to do a little public speaking course, or do a little Toastmasters course or something, because the interactions are a little different. You're often working with groups rather than individuals. But what a weird thing. I used to take it as for granted. It used to be a given. Yeah, of course. Yeah. A lot of great salespeople don't make great sales managers. And I just don't buy it anymore. I just don't think that's true. I think there's something that happens where implicitly or explicitly, when somebody gets promoted into management, they say, well, okay, I'm the manager now. I get to call the shots. I'm going, well, what gave you that idea? Is that how you've treated your managers in the past? And they go, oh, hell no, I don't care what my manager said. Oh no, I just, I pay lip service so that they leave me alone. And you go, so on what grounds do you perceive this working any different for you? I mean, everybody's had a good or and a bad leader at some point. And you can, I think, hopefully most of us can sort of readily identify that really great leader was doing something that comes pretty close to a good sales process, right?
Yeah.
Listening and being able to sort of diagnose before you prescribe, right? And I guess I'm talking a lot here. Sorry. I'll bring it back to what you said, in that I said, "What's the first thing you do when you take this leadership position?" And you said, "I spent 4 months walking around talking to people."
Exactly.
And to me, that's very clearly the right. I'm glad you said that, because that's very clearly the right answer, right? You don't. This is whereas I like to pick on MBA students and recent MBA graduates sometimes, or you see like a marketing campaign or some new product that's developed that's kind of harebrained, and you say, oh, I think that was an MBA graduate. I know who's responsible for that. They came in guns blazing and said, oh, I'm only going to be rewarded if I change things dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to change things right out of the gate. And they throw something out there. Like, well, yeah, people are looking, they hired you into this position to see improvement, to see development, to see new things happen. But you have to be a little patient. You have to ask the right questions. You have to listen. You have to be humble.
Mm-hmm.
You might have some ideas or some suspicions, and you might even be right, but you also have to shut up and not jump the gun on those suspicions and let it be confirmed and gather your evidence. You have to do a little Columbo, We're going to stop it right there for now. Please dive into the next episode of the Sales Lab to hear the conclusion of this interview. And by the way, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe and to rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.